One of the biggest reasons why intuition feels so confusing for people is they think there's just one right way to access it. The truth is there are a lot of different ways to channel and use your intuitive abilities. So in this video, I'm going to break down the different types of psychic abilities, the different ways to channel, and I'm going to help you figure out what the best access point is for you. One of the choices that I constantly get to make as an intuitive is how I use my abilities. And I was meditating this morning and reading the field and channeling a bunch of information. And one of the things that the guides were expressing was that I should break down different types of channeling and the different ways that you can use your intuitive gifts. So I thought this would be really valuable if you are someone who, one, consumes this type of content or is interested in this world and you don't really understand what's going on. I totally get it, because before I actually did this, I definitely didn't understand the mechanics of what was going on. Or two, if you are opening up your intuitive abilities and you're wondering different ways that you can use them, this could be really helpful, because you always want to lean into how your gifts are naturally flowing through. And a lot of us have conditioning to constantly try to improve what we're not as good at. And that's an important concept, so we're well-rounded in life, but there are places where that's not actually good advice. And when it comes to developing your intuitive gifts, it's all about really leaning into what you're naturally good at and then deepening that mastery. So practicing in that mastery. And one of the things that I have learned over the years, when I first started, I really wanted to be the best at everything. And I very quickly realized I was always going to get the best results and get the clearest information and have the most fun doing it when I just honed in on how my gifts naturally were coming through and what was strongest for me. And just like anything else in life, it really, with psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, specialization is everything. The more you can specialize, the more you're going to be able to deepen that practice and deepen that mastery. So I think that understanding the mechanics of this can be really helpful. I'm sure some of you already deeply understand this, but for those of you who don't or want a refresher, here we go. And I'm really going to orient from my own personal experience. I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but one of the things about me is my gifts do come through in a lot of different ways. So I have practice in a lot of different arenas, and as we go through, you'll kind of see there's certainly areas I don't specialize in. But I kind of think about it like, I don't know, like gymnastics is often a good example. My friend used that example with me once, where I actually don't know if this is true, but I think that like most gymnasts, you do everything, but then you have something you're really good at, right? But you do need to know you need to know how to do all of them. But you might have something that you're really good at, but that doesn't mean you can't do everything else, if that makes sense. So, I'm going to anchor in from my perspective, and I'm not going to be able to tell you every single way intuitive gifts can come up and the only types of mechanics that we can use when we're working with our gifts. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But I'm just going to try to hit the most common ones I find. But there are just so many ways you can use your intuitive abilities. If you have psychic abilities, just so many. This cannot be an exhaustive list. So I'm going to go through the ones that I think come up the most often, especially if you're seeing different readers utilize their gifts. I think this can help you better understand why they have the process that they have and where it's coming from. So I am going to start with just psychic abilities. Because I want to anchor us in there. All of these more specific types of channeling I'm going to discuss are all rooted in different ways to use your psychic abilities. So when I'm talking about channeling, I can talk about this in a really broad sense. I could talk about this in terms of channeling being when you are in pure flow state and something is moving through you is the broadest definition. But really, when most people in the realm of psychic senses are talking about channeling, that can get a lot more specific. But with your psychic abilities, you're utilizing your psychic seeing, your psychic hearing, your psychic knowing, your psychic feeling, your psychic smell, your psychic taste, all of your senses that are going beyond the physical. So if I'm psychically seeing, that might look like I'm seeing something in my mind's eye, or I am seeing something that's not in the physical realm outside of me. So for me, I see energy fields and I see spirits, and they are outside of me the way that my videographer, Tinelli, is here with me. But I can tell the difference because they're more, for me at least, more like holograms. For other people, they're not. I know for many people, they can't even tell the difference. So those are different ways that your psychic sight or clairvoyance can come through. Or with your clairaudience, that might look like your psychic hearing. That might look like you are hearing something in your mind. So it might feel like it's similar to a thought, but there's a different place that comes from, a different texture. Psychic hearing can also be you're hearing something that sounds like it's coming from outside of you, similar to if I'm hearing Tinelli's voice over there, it's something that's coming from outside of me going to my ear. So it's different for everybody. Those are two examples. Psychic knowing, you just know information. You just know it. You just know it, and there's no explanation. Psychic feeling, this could be emotional, this could be physical. Emotionally, you're getting an emotion based on the energy around you. So you're picking up on something psychically through an emotion. So maybe you are sitting next to somebody on the bus and you start to feel really, really sad. And that could be your psychic senses, your clairsentience, your psychic feeling telling you that person is really, really sad. That's one way it could work. Another way can be through a physical sensation. So maybe you get a body rash, or you get really bloated, or you get really dizzy when you're around certain things. And that's giving you intuitive information. Like there's a lot of unprocessed energy can often make me dizzy, for example. With taste and with smell, you could taste something or smell something even though you didn't eat anything. There's nothing that smells that way. So for me, a lot of times when I go into homes, I'll smell the scent of whoever lived there last. And it's very distinct. And the thing that's tricky about smell is you really have to ask people outside of you, do you smell that? And if everybody says no, then you know. And then taste, you might be talking to somebody or around someone and suddenly you start to get a taste in your mouth. Chocolate or lavender or coffee or metal or anything. So that's another way it could come through. There's lots of different ways, but basically we are getting information with our psychic abilities. These are senses that are not our 3D senses, but rooted in something extra sensory. It's a way that we are picking up on energy. It's a way that we are picking up on the unseen and getting that information. And so at its most basic form, that's the base of how we are channeling or intuiting, using our intuition. Okay, so once people have psychic senses, what are the different ways that they could utilize that? A lot of this has to do with, one, the mechanics of how it's working, like actually how that channel is flowing, and two is who or what you're communicating with. And those are the two main ways that this starts to get differentiated. So to give you some examples, let's say you're an Akashic Records reader. This is a way that many people choose to use their intuitive abilities. And again, I'll go back to, there can be a choice involved, and there's also just a natural resonance where you're just getting that type of information naturally, right? There's so much in the field of energy that I don't psychically get. And then there's this other area that I'm getting a ton around because that's the type of information that wants to move through me. That's just what I'm attuned to. The same way somebody who is a musician hears notes and can tell information based on those. They know what the notes are, and I don't know the difference between anything. Same thing, because I'm not meant to be a musician, right? I'm not attuned to that. So Akashic Records, this comes down to, how am I using my gifts? You can utilize any and all psychic abilities, and some people have a very specific psychic ability that's their strongest, that kind of leads them. And other people use a collection of all of them or a collection of a few of them. Everybody's different. I would say a lot of people will have a strongest sense that they lean on. And the longer you do it, often you start to kind of collapse all of them together the same way. For me, at least, when I was first really specializing, when I was first really mastering these abilities, it was easier for me to separate things out and, one, just really work on my clairvoyance and focus on that, and two, really work on my clairaudience and focus on that, and so on and so forth. Now, the same way that me just being in this physical 3D room and I'm understanding what's in this room, I'm not separating out my experience of this reality just through my sight or just through what I hear. I'm taking in all of those senses, and that's how I'm experiencing reality. That's also more how I read energy now. But with the Akashic Records, for example, the specialization and the distinction is you're reading the Akashic Records, which is the record of someone's soul. So you're looking at past, present, future, which all of that is actually the same, right? You're looking at that person's soul frequency, and some people can specialize within the Akashic Records related to anything, you know. Some people it's a lot more about life advice, or some people it's more career focused. For other people it's more deeper healing. There's a lot of healing work that can be done on a soul level in the Akashic Records. So you can pretty much do anything in the Akashic Records and pretty much get any information related to an individual and their soul. And some people will utilize all their psychic abilities there. Others will primarily see things in the records or get the information through their clairaudience, through their hearing, others through a knowing. Again, it could go many different ways. This is a common way that comes through. Next, I would talk about mediumship. Mediumship is a term that I do know that different people use this term differently. That's totally okay. The way that I define this, and this can be used more flexibly, but for me, mediumship is going to refer to primarily communicating with people who are no longer in this time-space reality. Specifically, if somebody's communicating with transitioned loved ones, for example, that is classic mediumship. Also spirit baby mediumship, animal mediumship. So you can specialize in who you're communicating with specifically, but this is really about a specific frequency you are tapping into, because different energies on the other side, so different, quote, people, I'll just use that word for ease of explaining, on the other side exist in different dimensions and come through in different dimensions. So a lot of when we start to specialize, we are connecting to a different dimension, and doesn't matter if it's a higher dimension or a lower dimension. A dimension is just about density, essentially. They're all great. It's all just different layers of information. So for example, I could take one topic, and this is how I like to read things personally. I'll take one topic and I like to read it at every single dimension, because I get really valuable information at every different frequency bandwidth, at every single density. So Akashic Records is going to be more, traditionally like 7th dimensional. Mediumship is going to be traditionally more 4th, 5th, 6th. And we could get, more granular, but for the sake of understanding this. So, other ways that people might refer to this is a blank communicator. So I think about it like an animal communicator is a popular style of using psychic abilities, right? So you can communicate with that frequency, or some people might say they are a galactic communicator or a galactic channel. I'm going to throw some of these out. So none of these are actually describing to me the mechanics of how somebody uses their abilities, but they are describing to me who or what they're connecting with specifically. So if I'm a galactic channel, a lot of people use that term, and that could mean that they're actually technically channeling, which I'll talk about in a second. That could mean that they are communicating specifically with galactic frequencies. And even within that, there could be a more specific way of describing that. Are these ET frequencies, or are these more energetic galactic frequencies? So there's different densities even within the galactic realm. But that's telling me who they communicate with, or I'm communicating with animals, or I'm communicating with beings on the other side, or I'm communicating with your soul. But within that, you could use your gifts anyway. This could be somebody who is clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant, any and all of it. This could mean somebody is talking to the being and then sharing with you what they're saying. This could mean that person is seeing images and describing what's going on. This could mean that person is in a flow state and that energy is kind of moving through them and they're channeling in that way. So that's the next thing that I'll get to. I want to talk about two kind of distinctions, and this is in my work a lot more of how I like to look at it. So one is going to be reading energy. And then two is going to be more classic channeling. So, reading energy. When I am doing my work, I like to get information in quite a few different ways. Like if I'm in a session with somebody, or if I'm channeling just for myself, the first thing I like to do is like to read the energy. And for me, that is an experience of looking at someone's energy field. So for somebody else, that might be more in their psychic experience, like in their mind's eye, or with those classic psychic abilities more internally with how they're feeling. They're going to feel the energy. They're looking at the energy in some way. For me specifically, that looks like, and I'll use a session as an example. When I'm giving somebody an energy healing session, it's combined with an intuitive reading, because what's happening is they're laying on the table, and the first thing I do is I just read the energy. So I look at what their circuits look like on their body, and I look at their auric field. I am looking at what's hanging out in there and who's in there. I'm reading what the energy is. I'm looking at it and then describing what's happening. Okay, that's one orientation. The other orientation is the channeling, where instead of I'm looking at this and seeing what's going on, I kind of think about it like I have a bird's eye view on the situation. The channeling is more, the flow is moving through me, and that's how I'm getting the information. So the channeling would be something to the effect of I'm connected in with their soul energy, or with a guide, or with a group that I work with an ascended master, and I'm connected to that frequency, and that frequency is flowing through me and using me as a vessel to transmit the message. And to describe the different ways that can show up, I'm going to give you a few different examples. So we know I'm sure you know some popular channels, and there's a few different types. So I'll talk about trance channeling. Now, this is the way that my channeling first really opened. I would say before that, I was using my gifts a lot more. I was reading the energy and kind of repeating back or explaining what was being said. And we're channeling in a more kind of mainstream way would come through is when I would be in flow state and writing something like that. But real channeling in the intuitive arts, if we're getting more specific about that, because here's the thing, all of these are types of channeling, but often when we say, oh, I'm a channel, we're often referring to one of these more specific types of channeling, okay? So I know these terms can get confusing. There's a lot of overlap. And there's not a right or a wrong way. I'm just describing this because when you're trying to understand your own gifts or how other people are getting information, it's helpful to start to peel these apart. Trance channeling is one type of channeling where you essentially go into a trance-like state And from there, an energy will move through your vessel to communicate. So for me, this looks like I will drop into a trance-like state, and then whatever the energy is that wants to move through me. So often people will work with a specific being or a group. So it could be like Bashar, for example, goes into a state and allows that being to communicate through you and to speak directly through you. So the experience on the receiving end is like you're talking directly to that energy, directly to that being. That's one way that you can mechanically channel. The other way that you can channel would be through conscious channeling. And there are different flavors to this. A lot of people experience it or describe it as direct voice channeling. I'll add that here. So conscious channeling is where you're more in a conscious state. So whereas in a trance, it would be kind of like eyes closed, kind of dropped into my trance state, and then the beings are moving through me or talking through me. The conscious channeling, your eyes could be open or closed, but you're not fully in the trance. So you are conscious of what's being said as it's being said. And the internal experience of that can look different for different people. Conscious channeling can be experienced as you just know what to say and it comes through, and there's a stream of energy essentially moving directly through you and are conscious of it, but you just know what to say and it's just flowing out of you through whatever it is that you tapped into to be a conscious channel of. But it's not you thinking about anything. Like your thinking has come out of the equation. You're just consciously channeling. But that's the main difference, is you're very aware of everything that's happening and you're not necessarily in a trance-like state. So for example, Abraham Hicks, Esther is channeling consciously. Like she is aware of what's happening, eyes are open. She is, well, she's described it as there are blocks of thought where she just knows what to say and it just comes through her naturally. And then direct voice channeling is another way of describing it. Seeing a direct voice channel can be really magical, where eyes are open and basically the being just directly moves through the voice, and often the voice will either intensely or subtly change depending on who's communicating through the person. But that's the idea of the mechanic. It's going directly through the voice. So if I go deeper into some of the mechanics of it, and I'll speak from experience here because I can channel in all of these ways, and I know a lot of you have kind of probably seen me do all these different ways of channeling and using these gifts, and I make a choice about if I want to kind of read the energy or relay back what I'm seeing, or if I want to go into a trance and communicate and have the being directly communicate it. Or if I want to be present during it and allow that energy to come through. Some people will call it blended channeling, where it could be, and I probably do this more often than not. I'm present and my higher self is part of the equation, and then also I'm connected into a group or a being or different groups, and we're all kind of sharing as one big transmission. That is one way of describing it, a blended channel, where like for me it's like I'm here and present and also they are, and what's coming through is kind of a collection of all of it. That's the blending. Versus if I'm in a trance-like state, it's a lot more like I'm just fully relaxed and surrendered, and they are just using my voice box. Or mechanically it can feel different. So when I first started channeling, it was very much I would go into a trance and my voice would be used. And I would be talking and I wouldn't really know exactly what I was saying. At first, I had no idea what I was saying. And then the more I practiced, I would start to get impressions in my mind's eye about what was being said. So I didn't hear the actual words that were being said, but I would see images in my mind's eye, or just have like a feeling of what the transmission was. So I would know what was being talked about, but I wouldn't know exactly what was said about it. That was one experience. But if I could distill it down, the mechanic was very much my voice was getting plugged into, and they're just using my voice. As years passed, it kind of transitioned, and I could still use that mechanic, but it was a lot more just becoming, almost like that energy would plug into my identity, and kind of my whole essence. And this is, for those of you who were there for the year of the Oracle, channeling the Oracle, that was a lot more of what it was. It was my whole essence would become, and it was like kind of my whole body would become. So I wasn't in a trance and just my voice being used, kind of like you just become that other frequency. And then so what comes forward, it was naturally the transmission, so to speak. That's another mechanic. And the other mechanic can very much be, it's more plugged into your upper chakras, your crown, your third eye. It's more up here. And then your voice stays consistent, but you are just sharing what's flowing in through those upper chakras. But that channeling experience in these capacities is distinct because it's very much allowing a direct transmission from whoever you're connecting with. So if I give you an example, if I wanted to read your soul energy, I could look at it like an observer, like looking at it and describe to you what's going on energetically and the things that I'm seeing and reading and knowing based on what I'm looking at. I could also allow your field to move through me and communicate directly to you. So the best way I can describe it is based on my experience of just like how it feels. And one would be, I'm looking at this and consciously describing what my psychic senses are seeing. And the other would be, I am in some way becoming. I'm in some way allowing it to use me directly as a vessel. So there's no me in between. And all is great. All are valuable. And you follow what's natural for you. And all require responsibility and training. I would say this is not something to be played with lightly. Like this is where a lot of people get inaccurate. This is where a lot of people have more issues, because that's not the most, well, I would say you either have a natural resonance for this, or, not that you can't learn it, but I just think you should follow your natural resonance always. And so if we look at, things higher up, people could be using these types of techniques to read your Akashic Records or to be a galactic channel. They could also be using techniques where they are the interpreter and explainer and like staying kind of conscious in between. And all of that, if you start to peel this apart, it can be helpful because you do get different information by looking at things in a different way. And so when I am channeling for myself, I like to, like this morning, I always meditate for a bit before we record, and I will always look at my actual body, like, and see what my field looks like. And then I will close my eyes and look in my mind's eye at what I'm seeing, what I'm getting. And I'm still conscious, and I'm often like writing down notes of what I'm seeing. But then what I'll do is I might communicate with the Ascended Masters, or it might be source energy, right? And that's another mechanic. Like I could channel directly into source energy. I could read a source field, or I could allow that to communicate through me, and same with any type of being. But I might talk to Yeshua. I might call him in and have a conversation, like I'm having a conversation with Ty Nelly over here, and chat back and forth. Or I might close my eyes and have him talk to me clairaudiently, or see him in my mind's eye. For me personally, it's easier to see it externally and talk to it like I would a person in the 3D than it is closing my eyes. That's just for me personally. It's actually easier. For other people, it's the opposite because it helps them to remove any stimulation of what's going on. So everybody's just different. And then I will channel. So I, for myself, typically more channel different groups of light beings I work with because they're at a higher frequency and it's just a different type of information. And this is where there'll just be a stream of information. I'll just be saying it and I'll record it. And that is a message for me later where I can actually allow myself to become. And in becoming, I get a different quality of information than I get from just looking at something. This is not comprehensive, but I do feel like this is a good outline of just some different mechanics and some different ways of reading energy. And so you can start to understand maybe some of this language, some of these words. Some people explain what they do more based on who or what they are, who they're communicating with or the topic they're talking about, right? Like some people might be a twin flame reader, for example. And other people, of course, I can't believe I forgot this. You could read tarot. You could use a tool, tarot or oracle cards. You could use pendulum or dowsing rods. You could read crystals. And so often, again, you'll use your psychic abilities along with these tools to get a different information, and that channel opens up for you when you combine all of those, right? So you might pull some cards, and as you're pulling the cards, you know things about what the cards mean, but you're also combining that with you're hearing things or seeing things, you just know things, / that whole frequency just kind of moving through you, and you're just in that flow state of sharing. So that's another way that your gifts can come through. In my journey, the most important thing has been noticing how things are naturally coming through and cultivating all of that and just finding whatever is the easier, cleaner read. For me, because I use my gifts in a lot of different ways, when I'm asking a question, I will take a step back and I will often just get information at every level I can. Other times I might look this way or try that technique and I'm not getting much. And then I find the technique and it just flows in because sometimes it just wants to flow in. For me, one of the things that happens sometimes when the guys just want to talk directly is I start to get really dizzy and I start to get really sleepy. And I'll be like, why am I so dizzy and sleepy? But it's because they're trying to just get me to go into surrender and they want to communicate directly. That's a sign for me. And other times doing that, I feel like there's just not something that wants to communicate directly. I'm the one that's meant to be in the driver's seat. So often based on who or what you're tapping into, there will be an easier way to read. And the easiest way to read is in that setting, and also for you as an individual is going to be what you'll want to continue to do. A lot of times people will feel like they're not getting anything, and it's because they're, quote, looking in the wrong place. Like they are trying to pull the information from the place where the information doesn't live or where they're not naturally resonant to read into. So for example, some people might have a really strong angelic connection. They might be a channel for angels. And so connecting with that part of the frequency bandwidth is really easy and effortless. And they might feel like when they try to tap into a past loved one, they're not really getting much, or it's really staticky, or it's hard to connect in with. That's totally okay. It's just because you're more attuned to that radio station. So focus on that radio station, and vice versa. Maybe somebody who communicates a lot with past loved ones, when they try to connect in with the angels, maybe it's, few and far between, it just kind of pops in, or maybe it just feels really static here. It feels a little bit more difficult. So instead of wasting all of your time trying to get information on a staticky radio station, just go to the radio station or the mechanic that is working best for you. And that will allow you to improve the quality of information. So this is a little bit of an overview. I would love to hear what you connect with. I just have found for me, because I do a lot of different styles of communication. I work a lot with the Ascended Masters and angels. I do a lot of just straight source stream readings. I do a lot of soul work. I communicate with past loved ones, angels, ETs. Like I can communicate with a lot of different beings, and I do utilize kind of all these different ways of working. It's all great. It's all beautiful. It's just different types of information, and we can use that to our advantage. But this might give you some insight into different people's processes or kind of how they're getting the information and what their experience is. I think that often people feel like if somebody is psychic, which is the most general term in my opinion, that they just know everything. And that's just not how it works. Like I certainly don't know everything, but it's that we have an ability to tap into information that's not available with just our 3D senses. But what that information is and how it works is going to be more specific. So my job as an intuitive, as a psychic, as a channel is not to know everything. My job is just to be the communicator of what wants to move through me and do the work of intuitive responsibility and discernment and making sure it's a clean read and making sure that where it's flowing from is loving and is helpful and is authentic. And that's very different than my job being to know everything. So that might ease some of the pressure that you might feel, because I do have a lot of students who come to me and I can tell they put all this pressure on themselves to be good at everything, and trying to read everything all the time, you're just going to feel like you're getting nothing, because we have to focus to learn more. If you are curious about opening up some of these abilities, about learning what resonates most with you, this is what Next Level You is designed to do. So just the act of doing the guided energy work and the meditations, they're designed to help this naturally come forward for you. But we have specific guided energy work and meditations in there that can help turn some of this on. So at the base level, I would recommend using the Activate Your Spiritual Gifts guided energy work. That is a beautiful way to help unlock in your energy field how your gifts uniquely want to come forward. And from there, it's just going to naturally start to flow through you. So that's what I would recommend starting with. We have a 7-day free trial if you want to check it out. You can just go to christinathechannel.com/membership to get your 7-day free trial, or just download my app. You can search Christina the Channel on the App Store, find it there, and you can sign up right there to get your 7 days free and try the guided meditation to activate your spiritual abilities. A lot of this, again, it's very different from how we do things in the 3D world. It's not a matter of just trying and trying harder and harder and harder. There's certainly practice and skill, but a lot of this, it's a natural opening. It's a frequency shift, and that's how a lot of your gifts will start to come online. I would also really encourage you, if a lot of this resonates, to explore the energy work side of things in my Ahai energy healing training, which level 1 is just if you want to learn to work with energy on your own, and level 2 is if you want to be able to send that to others. But I have in there, the whole foundations are connected to opening up your abilities, and we talk a lot about your psychic abilities, and it's meant to be both a psychic training and an energy work training, because they do go hand in hand. So the more that you work with energy, the stronger your psychic abilities are. And we have so many people who have gone through the program who have expressed that through their attunements of turning on the Ahai, their psychic abilities opened up just kind of naturally, because you're raising the frequency of your whole body. So if you're interested in learning more about my Ahai energy healing training, we do run that a couple of times a year. The wait list is always open though. It does usually fill up, but we'll put the link for that below so you can check it out if you're interested. So let me know how this lands. Let me know if there's a certain realm that you feel most connected to with your intuition. If it's more on the soul level, if it's more on the mediumship level, the animal level, Akashic Records, if it's more using a tool, all of it is so beautiful and lovely. And that's why we can learn something new from every single intuitive out there. All right. So that's my overview of types of channeling. And as always, leave a comment below. What are you drinking? I have my matcha here. Until next time, friends.